Hi guys, this video is going to be all about the Gemini Ascendant, otherwise known as Rising Sign. Before we jump into this video, I strongly recommend that you watch my video all about what the Ascendant is. I will link it here. But I will quickly cover how to find your Ascendant and what the Ascendant is before we jump into all about the Gemini Ascendant. Quick note, I will be using the word ascendant and rising interchangeably. They both mean the same thing for the purpose of this video. I will be putting some timestamps down below, so after we talk about how to find your ascendant and what the ascendant is, we'll cover how the ascendant has to do with your appearance, your health, your birth, your persona, and then we'll touch a little bit on the descendant. So let's jump into it. How do you find your ascendant? You want to be able to access your birth chart. You will need your date of birth, place of birth, and time of birth in order to do this. So unfortunately, for the purposes of this video, if you don't have the time of birth, this can be a little bit challenging. But for this video, you will need your birth chart to look at. You want to see what sign is on the first house cusp, and that is your ascendant sign. So if your ascendant sign is in Gemini, then you are in the right place for this video. So what exactly is the ascendant sign? Again, the ascendant sign is the sign on the first house cusp, and the first house has a lot to do with your physical body, your physical self, your appearance, your being, the way that you perceive the world, the way that the world perceives you. So the ascendant sign tells us all about that. The ascendant sign is a bit of a security blanket. It's our instinctual response and what we put out when we're unsure, uncomfortable in new situations, new environments, when we're around new people. So it's the persona that comes out naturally when we're in those situations. Some ascendant signs are more guarded than others, and others are more open. When it comes to the Gemini ascendant sign, not every ascendant sign is going to be exactly the same. You know, a lot comes into play with other planets that might be in your first house, with your chart ruler, with other planets interacting with the ascendant. All of this information can make ascendants different from one another, but there is a general undercurrent of that same type of energy within all the ascendant signs. So let's get into the Gemini ascendant specifically. So if your rising or ascendant is Gemini, then that means your chart ruler is Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini, so that will be a significant placement in your chart. And again, because the ascendant is on that first house cusp, it does have the ability to tell us about our appearance. Now, appearance in astrology, you can look at a lot of other factors as well, and I hope to cover that in a future video, but the ascendant sign does get associated often with our appearance, and a lot of people do look to it for appearance purposes, and it can be relevant. It's just important to acknowledge that many other factors are involved when it comes to our appearance. But what are some similarities that we can see when it comes to appearance with Gemini risings? Typically, a Gemini rising would tend to be smaller or slimmer, maybe more delicate. Even if they're very tall, they do tend to have a smaller look to them, whether that's, they're very thin or they just, I don't know if anybody still uses terminology like big boned, small boned, but something along those lines. They just tend to be typically smaller in some type of way. Maybe they have delicate features. Gemini risings do tend to be more in shape, or they tend to be, on the thinner side. Their hands or shoulders might be noticeable in some way. They might have a defining feature. They might be a defining feature. Usually Gemini risings tend to have a youthful appearance, even if they are older. Again, they might have delicate or refined facial features, like a thinner nose, stuff along those lines, like maybe not a round face, maybe one that's more refined, higher cheekbones. Geminis are the storytellers of the zodiac, so when it comes to having a Gemini rising, typically you can see expressions very clearly on their face. They have lively expressions. Their lips might be distinguishable, or they might have like a lip piercing, a tongue piercing. The forehead does tend to be larger, and the face shape does tend to err more towards a square. I've noticed a lot of Gemini risings have red hair, obviously not all of them, but I have noticed that a lot of Gemini risings do tend to have reddish coloring to their hair. I don't know why that is, but... So what can having a Gemini rising tell us about health? So typically health is associated with the 6th house in astrology, but the 1st house is important as well because, again, it is our physical body, so of course health would come into play here. So what can having a Gemini rising tell us about our health? A Gemini rising might have concerns with their mouth, their tongue. They could have speech issues or speech delays, and again, they might not have concerns. They could excel in these areas as well, but these might be concerns that a Gemini rising might deal with when it comes to their health, but it doesn't mean every Gemini rising is going to deal with it. It could also play out that these areas, like this person might be really good at making speeches. Could have issues with the hands, like broken bones, arthritis. They could just be somebody that bites their fingernails. There's a lot of nervous energy that is associated with Mercury and specifically with the Gemini zodiac sign. Could have issues with their nerves, issues with their digestive system, anything in the abdomen area. Could have breathing concerns, asthma, any issues with the lungs. Could deal with anxiety or other related issues. Might have perception or sensory concerns or issues. Could deal with learning challenges, or they might learn in a very unique manner. Insomnia might be something that Gemini risings have to deal with. So what can a Gemini rising tell us about our birth? And the reason we talk about birth is because the ascendant is associated with our entrance into the world. So of course, we can look at it when we're talking about, you know, the moment we were born. What was the environment like? What was the situation like around that time? Again, other things do come into play, other planets in the first house, aspects being made, so on and so forth, but let's take a look. The birth might have been quick in some way, it might have happened, you know, unexpectedly and just happened really quickly. Could have been a lot of rushing or racing around. Problem solving of some sort may have been a big factor in the birth. You know, anything clever, like perhaps there was an issue and then somebody had a clever idea, or there was problem solving that was needed in order for the birth to be, you know, as safe and healthy as possible. Could have been a lot of worry, you know, maybe the mother, or anxiety, or just other people, you know, around the environment when the birth was occurring. Any issues with lungs, hands, shoulders, and even the mouth. Might have had nervous system concerns. The birth could have been dramatic in some way, or like quite a story to tell. Might have been exciting. You know, intelligence might have been prevalent in some way. Like maybe somebody had a really good idea. Maybe something new was discovered. Maybe, you know, something along those lines. Could be an early birth or a smaller baby. Okay, so let's get into the persona of a Gemini rising. So Geminis are associated with that third house energy, which is I think. So sometimes Gemini rising might be the type to really have racing thoughts, overthink a situation. You know, again, the rising sign is what presents itself when we are in new situations, when we're forced to adapt, when we're around new people, when we're unsure, insecure, a little nervous even, or we feel like our safety is, you know, a concern. So you definitely might notice kind of a jittery or nervous or even excited energy when you're around a Gemini rising. So I've talked about the past couple rising signs being a bit more guarded, but I would say that the Gemini rising is not as guarded. They're just more likely to open up a bit more. Again, they do have a lot of nervous energy, but that energy doesn't prevent them from letting people in most cases. Gemini is a very curious sign. They want to learn, they want to engage, they want to teach and share. So they don't typically put up a huge wall, maybe a bit of one, but not so much as other signs, other rising signs that are more guarded. So talking more about this nervous energy, you know, it's just like this energetic, kind of fidgety, jittery kind of energy, and they don't always have it, but it is something you might notice more in a Gemini rising. They might talk really fast, they might speak in an interesting way. Gemini risings tend to be approachable. You know, they could be more timid in their approach, but they typically will tend to approach others. They do tend to be more sociable. They're not always super comfortable with being social, but it's kind of a natural way for them, whether they like it or not. They're a very adaptable rising sign, so they do tend to do well with new situations. Yes, they might get nervous. Yes, they might overthink them. It could cause anxiety, but they do tend to gradually accept new situations, and they do adapt quite well. So even if they are, you know, worried about something, they do tend to do well when meeting new people, maybe at a job interview, in a situation that is, you know, very new to them. They can really use that energy I keep talking about to engage with others. They can use it to their advantage. They tend to be friendly, enthusiastic, witty, smart, funny. They're one of the rising signs that do tend to shine in unfamiliar settings. Even if they think that they won't, you know, if they're like very nervous that they won't, they do tend to shine in settings where maybe other people are very uncomfortable. They can react with excitement when things are new, but again, they always do tend to overthink, and they're always going over things in their mind, even if it doesn't appear that way on the exterior. They do well with fitting in. They can enjoy different situations, which is why they do tend to be more adaptable. They're very curious, and they always have a need to be stimulated intellectually. They like to keep their mind stimulated. They hate to be bored, just like the sign of Gemini in general, but when they're in new situations, and this is why I bring it up, that Gemini energy, it might be nervous or, you know, things like that, but they do get excited. They're curious. They kind of thrive on that energy, which is why Gemini risings tend to do better than perhaps some of the other rising signs in uncomfortable situations. They could get easily overwhelmed in very busy or chaotic environments, even though they are very fascinated by them. Their mind can race from one thing to another, and it can be hard for them to focus their attention on one thing at a time. You know, I didn't mention this in the health portion, but a Gemini rising might also have to deal with things, I mentioned anxiety related, but they could also deal with things that have to do with their focus, like perhaps ADD, ADHD, things along those lines. It can be difficult for them to settle their energy in one area, at a time. They can definitely get frustrated with all the overthinking and the worrying. It can be a bit exhausting for them. But overall, they are very engaging people to be around. Again, if you're in a new situation and you're thinking of like all the rising signs are there, this is one of the signs that is going to kind of make people feel more at ease. They tend to be more talkative. They will approach others. They can engage, curious. They are funny. So they tend to be one of those rising signs that people gravitate towards. So when it comes to the descendant, just as a quick takeaway, Gemini is associated with I think. So if your rising is Gemini, then your descendant would be the opposite sign of Gemini, which would be Sagittarius, which is I perceive. So there is a push and pull between the energies of, what one thinks versus what one perceives, which could be very different from one another, but also almost one and the same, but just twisted a bit. For a Gemini, things that could be helpful to deal with that kind of restless energy could be, movement, taking action, and using that energy for things that are positive. So that is a Gemini rising sign. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are a Gemini rising, let me know down below, or if you know any Gemini risings, what do you think? Do you see any similarities here? I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day or night.